The world is full of scary stories, and the internet does like to play on people's fears in order to sell them stuff. But this is not that kind of video. I don't sell rings, I don't have a ring sponsor, and this is a real story. Like everyone else, I never thought this was going to happen to me, but it did happen. And I wish I had paid attention to the warnings before so I could have been more prepared when disaster struck. Now, just a heads up, this was a bloody and awful incident, but I'm not going to show you any of the gore because the message is important. I don't want anyone turning off the video because they can't handle blood. So, as many of you know, back in 2019, I was carving a large wood bench with one of these, an angle grinder equipped with a chainsaw-style carving disc. Now, I've made videos in the past about what happened, and I did show the gory details then, so I don't need to retell it all about the injury itself now. Instead, I want to focus on something that I hadn't put much thought into before the accident, but you can bet I have in the years since. I used to wear a titanium wedding ring on my left hand. This is what's left of it. Now, I've heard some folks say that they never wear rings at work, but I never really understood why. For example, I knew a mechanic who said he didn't wear one, but I just assumed it's because he had a greasy, messy job and it was just a pain to keep things clean. I knew an electrician who wouldn't wear one, but I figured that was due to some sort of risk of electrical shock, and since I wasn't an electrician, I figured I was fine. Frankly, I think a big part of the reason I ignored the warnings was because, especially when I was in my 20s and 30s, I just thought I was invincible, like you do at that time. I mean, what were the chances that I'd get a serious injury to this finger out of all 10? Even when I once slipped while climbing a ladder and the edge of my ring caught on the rung, thankfully only very slightly, I never considered how close I had just come to a potential horrific injury. Then 2019 came and I found myself with the severe injury to my hand, including my ring finger. Now, you probably know what happens when you severely injure yourself, right? You swell up. Whether it's a cut or a break or even just smashing your finger with a hammer, you're likely to experience some swelling. And within minutes, it can become too painful or even physically impossible to remove your ring. Now you're in trouble. Depending on how much the finger continues to swell, the ring can begin to cut off the blood flow, and what might otherwise have been a relatively routine injury can lead to serious complications, even the loss of a finger. So what do? You have to get it off. Well, in my case, my injury definitely required emergency care, which is a whole nother story. The emergency room doctor was a complete moron who did everything wrong, including sending me home with the ring still on my stitched up, shredded finger. It wasn't long before the swelling made it clear that that ring had to go immediately. And I ended up having to cut it off myself. I used a rotary tool with a diamond blade. It was a very slow, painful, and actually quite dangerous process because, as I said, it was a titanium ring. It didn't cut easily. In fact, the increased popularity of titanium and tungsten rings in particular have created a lot of complications when it comes to hand injuries. Even emergency rooms need special tools to remove them, which are not always readily available. And depending on the injury, it can be a very painful process. But imagine what might have happened if the blade had hit the ring itself instead of just my flesh. A chainsaw, or even a carbide-tipped saw blade, is not going to cut through titanium. So if a tooth catches on the edge of the ring, my entire finger could have been gone in an instant. Almost as bad is the chance of another catastrophic type of injury called degloving. If you have a very strong stomach, you might Google it, but really I suggest you don't, because it involves pulling the flesh of your finger off the end of the bone like the finger of a glove. This isn't just a risk with power tools. Catching your ring on anything from a ladder to a door that you're slamming shut can cause degloving. Is it rare? Maybe, but believe it or not, this happens 150,000 times a year in the US alone. That's 5 times more likely than a table saw injury. You take precautions to mitigate the risk of a table saw injury, don't you? Well, maybe it's time to think about your ring. My accident 4 years ago was my wake-up call. I've never worn a ring in the shop since. In fact, I haven't worn a ring at all until recently. I say recently because I did finally have to start wearing one again so the ladies would stop trying to marry me. And I did buy a regular ring, but I only wear it in formal settings. The rest of the time, I wear these silicone rings. These are designed to break under a load of about 30 pounds, without damaging your skin or causing a serious injury. Now, silicone rings aren't anything new, but they have gotten better over the years. For one thing, they've become more attractive with more styles and colors and designs. You can even get them in different patterns, like wood burl or all sorts of other things. And they're inexpensive enough that you can own a bunch of them and match them to your clothing if you're into that. But the biggest improvement is that some have channels on the inside to help prevent moisture buildup. The old ones would trap sweat or water from washing your hands, and it would keep that against your skin. That was not good. I wouldn't buy a silicone ring without those channels on the inside. Now, I've bought a couple of different brands, and if you want to know which ones, I'll put a link below this video. They're almost ridiculously cheap, like around $2 each in a multi-pack. But let me fill you in on a couple things I learned that will help you to choose the right ones. First, measure your finger accurately. You can do it with a strip of paper. There's a tutorial on the page where I bought my rings at the link below. Or just visit a jewelry counter the next time you're at a Walmart or pretty much anywhere that they sell rings and ask them to measure your finger size for you. It's free and it only takes a minute. Now, once you have your size, mine was 9mm by the way, buy the next size down. So I got some of these in 8mm, or get a half size down if that option's available. I think some of these are actually 8.5. Silicone will stretch out a little bit after you wear them for a few days, and you don't want them to end up too loose. But if you do order some and they don't fit, don't worry about it. Pretty much any seller will replace them with a different size for free. Sometimes you don't even have to send the first ones back. Now, I'm not saying you should never wear a metal ring, but I strongly discourage super metals like titanium and tungsten. And when you're doing any kind of work, stick with silicone. Hopefully, you'll never have to thank me for saving your finger. Now, here's some more good workshop advice. Some folks are a pleasure to work with, like Ken Rizzo over at woodturnerswonders.com. That's where I get my turning stuff, like sanding supplies and CBN wheels for my grinder. Seriously, if you haven't seen what CBN wheels can do for you, you are missing out. I'll put a link below this video. Use it and tell Ken I sent you.